I'm not sure how I pictured the period immediately after Eurovision, but I certainly didn't foresee the former head of the Czech delegation making a 15-minute-long diss on me that included this edit.
More armed police this week than I have ever seen before in Europe. Venues such as Euroclub were being swept for explosives and suspicious packages.
Luckily, there's been plenty of good news as well. We just hit 10,000 subscribers, and I want to say thank you so much for all of your support. It really means the world to me. Today, we're doing the video that I planned to do the week after Eurovision before circumstances got in the way, and that is the biggest winners and biggest losers. I have tried to cut it down to the main headlines. There are a lot of things I could have had in this video. I've condensed it down to about 10. I'll be revealing my number one biggest winner and biggest loser at the end of this video, so make sure to stick around for that. Before we get to that, make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. You can also follow me and my editor Jay on Twitter. You can also subscribe on Patreon and get the videos a day early and be thanked at the end of each video. With that out of the way, let's get down to business with our first winner. It's Switzerland. I mean, duh, they literally won the whole contest. Of course they were going to be here. I could probably leave this at that, but I do want to elaborate why the code won and why it did so well with the juries in particular. I actually think there is a pretty decent professional grounding on which you can say that this deserved a landslide victory, but I think it would help to explain why based on the criteria that the juries vote on. The first criteria is vocal capacity of the artist. There is no doubt in my mind that Nemo's vocals were among the best of the year and certainly the most versatile. This song has rap, it has opera, it has all kinds of different ranges that Nemo executes to perfection in every single case. It was by far the most ambitious vocal of any song this year, and Nemo didn't miss a single note. Second, performance on stage. Aside from the perfect vocal that I just mentioned, the daring nature of this staging, which came close to going wrong if you look at Nemo's feet during the final chorus of their performance in the final, meant that this element, just like the vocal, was ultra high risk, ultra high reward. Again, it was executed flawlessly. The breath control, the fitness that you need to be able to do what is essentially an intense 3-minute long workout while hitting all of those notes absolutely perfectly makes this a real standout among this year's performances. This is one of the most technically impressive stage performances in Eurovision, potentially of all time. The next criteria is composition and originality of the song, and I don't think I need to elaborate too much here. If this song is one thing, it's original, and the composition brings all these different genres together flawlessly. The final criteria is overall impression of the act. While that is pretty vague and essentially amounts to the juror's own personal preference, on the basis that everything else has been gotten right, it's going to end up being one of the jurors' favorites. If you look at the rest of the top 5 in the jury, which was France, Italy, Croatia, and Ukraine, all of those performances had some elements that fulfilled some of those criteria that I mentioned to a certain extent. None of them hit every single element like Switzerland did. That's why we ended up in a position where Switzerland got more than 20 sets of 12 points from the juries. None of those other countries brought it all together like Nemo and Switzerland did. Time for our first loser, and we're going to Ollie Alexander, unfortunately, and the UK. Dizzy was meant to be Ollie's launch under his own name. He's been releasing music for many years as years and years, but he's never released any music under his own name before. Because of that, this was a pressure point for him. It's a big moment in his career. This was meant to be a launch pad, and it didn't really work out on any front. Though the staging concept was really innovative, I really enjoyed the way that the staging was linked to the nature of the song. The vocals did fall a little short, and the intended splash that this song would have made on the charts simply didn't materialize. This peaked out at number 42 in the UK charts. That is hardly the best of omens for Ollie's coming album. There were also some pretty unfavorable comparisons between the backdrop of the stage piece and the bathroom from the Saw movies. As a result, the 0 from the televote was naturally bad news, and it bodes badly for Ollie's future as well. He didn't place higher than 14th with any country in the televote. Though he did take the news well, and credit to him for that, the UK's expectations for him were very, very high, and as an established artist, you come into this contest knowing that those expectations are going to be set higher than if you were a new or upcoming artist. As a result, the mood here after the contest was definitely one of disappointment. And while British attitudes have shifted since Sam Ryder's result in 2022, and we've seen a lot more people recognizing that the performance simply fell short rather than accusing Europe of having some kind of anti-British agenda, there was still a lot of disappointment, and it's going to hurt him when it comes to his debut album as well. A small distance away, but a massive contrast in fortunes, the next winner is Ireland, and I cannot believe I'm saying this after the last few years. Bambi Thug completely blew away everyone's expectations, including my own. I have to hold up my hands now and say I didn't get it after Eurosong. I was not a believer in this until quite late in the day. But I have to say the one performance that I've gone back and watched more than any other out of this year is Ireland. It is one of the best stage shows I have ever seen. I talked about this last week, about the way that every shot was so carefully constructed and worried over to produce absolute perfection. Based on the conversations I've had with Irish fans, this very much felt like a screw it, we have nothing to lose kind of year, and that risk massively paid off. Credit should also go to, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, the head of delegation, Michael Keeley, who clearly understood at an early stage that he needed to step back and just let Bambi and their creative team get on with it and do the job. Giving them that creative freedom meant that they were able to produce this incredible performance. Hopefully Ireland can build on this now because they have seen the taste of success and seen how taking a risk can really pay off. I don't want us to go back to the middle of the road pop that we've seen in the past. No more Wild Youth, We Are One style, nothing burgers, please, Ireland. This is a country that deserves more than 2 final appearances in 10 years, and hopefully number 3 will come in 2025. Another loser now, and unfortunately it's the host city, Malmo. I covered a lot of this in my previous video, but nothing sums it up better than the fact that the city has admitted that if Eurovision came back to Sweden, they would not bid to host it again. Malmo was always kind of a default choice because it was the only bid out of all of the ones submitted to the Swedish broadcaster that met the requirements. That meant they didn't really need to excel at anything. Simply because they ticked the boxes, they were guaranteed to be chosen. I do find it quite funny, by the way, that the reason Stockholm lost out on its main arena was because Taylor Swift had it instead, and I presume that her break clause is far too expensive to pay. Sadly, the fact that Malmo was this default choice really showed during the week, and it meant that a lot of things simply felt underwhelming compared to Liverpool last year. What won't have helped is a sizable proportion of visiting fans stayed in Copenhagen instead and spent a lot of their money there. Restaurants in Malmo were expecting a bumper week during the contest, but instead they had less business than usual. A lot of them made a loss and had to close during that week as a result. It simply wasn't economical to stay open. All of this meant not only did Malmo and Sweden miss out on a lot of the tourist benefits that come with the contest usually, it also meant that Denmark got a lot of them without having to pay a penny to host the contest. I was actually very close to listing them as a winner in this video, but I thought that would be a bit ridiculous considering they now also have the longest non-qualification streak of any actively participating country. Denmark, I'm letting you off this year. You will be a biggest loser next year if you don't qualify again. Consider yourself warned. Back to winners again. This one is a little self-indulgent, but please bear with me. I think Eurovision fan media was one of the really big winners this year, and I'll explain why. Amid the utter chaos and ridiculousness that took place this week, I thought Eurovision media really started to shine. It was the fan media in the press room breaking the news first, explaining the chaos, and getting to the bottom of the story, of the disqualifications, of artists missing shows and harassment from different delegations. All of this was being brought to the fore by a small number of committed fan journalists. The thing that's worth remembering here is that we are all massive nerds, and the amount of time investment we have put into the contest really pays off in situations like this, because every rule, someone in that press center will know it inside out. A large number of the developments that happened through the 48 hours from the Yoast Klein disqualification scandal first being reported through to the grand final were reported on first by fan media, who managed to get the story before anyone else. A perfect example is how it was broken that graphics had been sent to broadcasters with 36 juries on instead of 37. This is how we know that at some stage the position from the EBU was to remove the Netherlands from the voting entirely. Without fan media, that never would have been reported. More generally, I want to shout out all of the fan creators who have invested thousands and thousands of hours into creating Eurovision content and helped build the amazing community that we are all part of. One of the beauties of Eurovision is that we have this truly unique fan environment. It is like a big dysfunctional family, and I wouldn't change it for the world. It's one of a kind, and we should fight to protect it. Another loser now, and this one actually really hurts. It's Norway, and more specifically the Norwegian language. Water were a massive departure from what we've come to expect from Norway Norway in recent years. Folk metal is a long, long way from the kind of well-varnished, well-polished pop that we have seen in the years before. It was also the first time they've sent a song in Norwegian since 2006. I'll hold my hands up and say I was one of the people who expected this to do really well. So well, in fact, that I predicted on an ESC United livestream that this could win the semi-final. Turns out I was a bit wrong. While Norway did get through to the final, it did so by a whisker, finishing 10th in the semi and only qualifying by 5 points. That would have been one of the biggest shock non-qualifiers in recent years, in my opinion. They then finished last in the final by a difference, only being spared last place in the televote by Ollie Alexander. Half of their jury points came from Albania and 3/4 of their televote points came from Ukraine. They only succeeded in picking up scraps, 1s and 2s from other countries. In total, 16 points was all they amassed, and that left them dead last on the scoreboard. Given Norway's high standards, even though they made the final, this result will have been a massive disappointment. My worry for the future is that it means we won't see Norway take this kind of risk again. Even now, the public in Norway was only willing to take this kind of risk because Gorta are a well-established band. They're extremely well respected in Norway, and they have an amazing reputation that spans decades. I'm expecting a kind of anti-Ireland effect here, where while the risk that Ireland took was validated, because the Norwegian one wasn't, they're going to retreat back to what they know, and we're going to see more polished pop like we've seen in the past in the future. This isn't necessarily a bad thing because we need good, strong pop in the contest. I just think it's always good when countries are willing to take a risk, because that's how we get some genuinely iconic Eurovision entries. The other shame here is that I think we're not going to see Norwegian from Norway again. That's especially sad because this year was the first time we had seen it in the contest since 2006. Scandinavian languages overall don't get anywhere near as much credit as they deserve in Eurovision, and sadly that looks like a trend that's going to continue because there is no way that Sweden is going to send a song in Swedish anytime soon. It's a real credit to Norway that they took such a risk and put this through to Eurovision this year, but I don't think we're going to see a similar story again anytime soon. Back to winners now, and this one is fairly obvious. Let's talk about Baby Lasagna. We've all seen the story now, unsigned and writing songs in his bedroom, a reserve in the national final, to winning the show by a landslide, and then going and winning the televote at Eurovision as well. There's probably a whole video in that story, and I might actually do that at some point. From a few hundred monthly listeners before, Baby Lasagna now has 3.9 million on Spotify, and the universal adoration of Croatians as well. He sold out 3 shows in Zagreb in minutes, and he has an album that is literally 100% done and ready to go. All of this means a few things. Number 1, his future in the music industry is totally secure. Number 2, his album is going to be a massive success in Croatia and probably do a fair bit of damage abroad as well. Number 3, he's about to make an absolute truckload of cash. Things are pretty good for Mr. Lasagna right now. I think the thing that really adds to this feel-good story is that it couldn't happen to a kinder, more gentle person. Every interview you see with this guy, he is clearly so humble, and I have not met a single person throughout the entire Eurovision experience this year who has had any bad moments with him whatsoever. Every fan journalist, every volunteer, he has been nothing but lovely. Though he did fall just short of winning the contest, this is just the beginning for him, and I'm sure of that. Not only does he have Croatia's best ever result as an independent country and the universal love of Croatians as a result of that, I think there's a lot more really good things to come for Baby Lasagna too, so I'm excited to see where he goes next. I have a few quick honourable mentions before I talk about my biggest winner and biggest loser of this season, and the first one, an honourable mention for a winner, is Isaac from Germany. Everyone wrote this guy off. Everyone wrote Germany off, myself included, and then he finishes on the left-hand side of the scoreboard, which I think is a pretty impressive result. Sure, the song was unadventurous. Sure, it's not going to pull up any trees, but by Germany's standards, this was like a win because they have been awful for years. I would still like to see something a little more risky, maybe call up Electric Callboy again, but all the same, this was a success and Germany should celebrate it. The same goes to Dons from Latvia, who everyone gave no chance of qualifying, which he then did in the end easily. I wish I could relive that moment in the press center when it was announced that Dons had qualified, because the collective gasp that went up from the room, utterly priceless. Finally, in terms of my honourable mentions on the winner's side, Celia Kapsis, despite her age, her inexperience, produced a really creditable performance, and she should be congratulated for that. In the end, it was really, really solid. The worries that I had were completely unfounded, and she fully deserved her place in the final. In terms of losers, Belgium and Musty have to get a shout out for 1 point being as high as 4th in the odds and somehow contriving to finish 13th in the semi-final. Bessa from Albania must get a mention as as well for completely ruining her song with the revamp when it was much, much, much better in the original Albanian. Now it's time for our biggest winner and biggest loser of the year, and you won't be surprised about this one. The biggest loser is the EBU and Martin Osterdahl. This one is by a very considerable margin. I literally made an entire 30-minute long video last week about how terrible the job they did was. Martin Osterdahl's position as executive supervisor of the Eurovision Song Contest is now completely untenable, as I said last week. When you have a double-figure number of delegations complaining about a whole range of issues, from harassment to the use of anti-booing technology to the handling of the disqualification of the Netherlands, you are in big trouble. I really can't see the bond of trust between the EBU and the delegations being rebuilt as long as Martin Osterdahl is still in charge. We've now seen broadcasters calling for answers about some of the things that went wrong during Eurovision week, and if they're willing to say those things publicly, imagine what they're saying in private. As for what the audience thinks, the booing that we heard when it cut to his regular spot before announcing the results says everything we need to know. I have never seen a Eurovision crowd anything close to this level of angry before. All we can hope for is a clear out of the EBU top brass, and it needs to happen now. Hopefully that will result in a contest that is healthier in the long run. In recent years, we've watched many countries in Eastern Europe drop out of the contest because it has become too expensive. It won't help that the reference group that controls the contest at the moment is mostly populated by Western European broadcasters, because a lot of the members are from recent winners of the contest. That means in this case, we have now Switzerland, Sweden, the UK, and Ukraine. 3 out of 4 of those are in Western Europe. In fact, the only country in Eastern Europe to have won Eurovision in the last decade is Ukraine, which has done it twice. Let's hope whatever team replaces the current EBU setup brings back Eastern Europe into the fold, and I don't care what you have to do, reduce the affiliation fees, give them payment plans, grants, anything, get them back, because there are countries like North Macedonia, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, who desperately want to be in the competition. We should let that happen. They just need a European Broadcasting Union and a Eurovision that will help them do that. Finally, it's time to talk about our biggest winner. This one may come across a little weird. The biggest winner of this year's Eurovision Song Contest is Yoast Klein. Let me explain why. I don't think anyone expected that Yoast Klein's Eurovision experience would end in the way it did. Nor did any of us want it to. Though we shouldn't prejudge the ongoing case while it works its way through the Swedish legal system, despite everything, Yoast's reputation has emerged from Eurovision greatly enhanced. Because of how terribly the situation was handled, public opinion has already made its mind up, and that is that Yoast was completely screwed over by the EBU. In turn, his popularity has exploded. He gained 1 million Instagram followers during Eurovision week. Europapa has ended up in charts all across Europe. In terms of a sustained popularity boost from the contest, this matters a lot. Though his participation ended in tears one way, it set him on a path that will continue to reward him into the future. It's incredible that despite the majority of audiences never seeing him perform live, because most people do not watch the semi-finals, the song has still made it into Spotify streaming charts in more than 20 countries. That's despite the fact that most people listening to this song do not understand the lyrics. At the time of filming, it has more daily streams than any other Eurovision song, including the actual winner. It's been streamed in total more than 75 million times. I don't envy what Yoast has had to go through over the past couple of weeks. I would be absolutely distraught by the way this Eurovision experience has ended if I was in his shoes. What I hope is that the positives of this experience that are already emerging for him and for his music will help to heal some of the scars that have been formed as a side effect. That hopefully will help him heal from the trauma of what transpired in those few days. Yoast also won another way. Whilst his experience was cut short, he fulfilled his lifelong dream to perform on the Eurovision stage and did what he set out to do, which was make his parents proud. Overall, it's been a Eurovision year with a lot more highs and lows than any of us could have expected. Even though this has been one of the most difficult years to follow the contest, there are plenty of signs of hope for the future as well. There are a lot of important decisions for the EBU to make over the next 12 months, from ensuring the accessibility of the contest to countries that struggle to afford it, to ensuring that artists are safeguarded from harassment at the contest. Honestly, that is just the tip of the iceberg. In the meantime, I'm pleased to say that from my side, videos will not be stopping. There is no off-season on this channel. The iceberg videos are coming this summer, and there are some really special surprises, hopefully, to come in there. And we'll have the time again to put together the kinds of deep dives that we did with Finland and with Sweden at the back end of last year, and I can't wait to share with you some of the things I've got planned. In terms of frequency, you should assume videos will be once a fortnight. I'll try and do weekly where I can, but that is not always possible, and I really need a bit of a rest too after how hectic the last few months have been. In any case, I am really looking forward to sharing all of those things with you. Thank you again so much for making this one of the most wild rides that I could possibly have imagined Eurovision to be, and I can't wait for next year. Let's do it together. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video. Please share it, like, subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you very soon.